Welcome back, guys, to episode 9 of the Roblox UI library series. In this episode, we're going to be doing the drop down, and in the next episode, we're going to be finishing up the library. So let's just get right into it. We're going to scroll all the way down to after the slider and just add a drop down object. So as always, we're just going to take the options. So for the drop down, we're going to be needing the title, the callback, and an items table. As for the render, we're going to go into the script for all the stuff, and we're going to copy it all the way until the inactive option. So right here. And we're going to paste it in, rename all the library.trees with dropdown, and replace the top one with tab. So now we're just going to do the name. Just like so. And yeah, now you want to take all the stuff that holds like the inactive option, and also forgot the actual name, is this right here. Okay, so yeah, and you just want to cut that away, but make sure you still have it for later. So yeah, this is basically all you have to do for the drop down. If we create this right now, it should have it. So let's just try that real quick. So quickly just disable the UI. Alright, so as you can see, the drop down is there. For the drop down, we're gonna have a few functions or methods. We're gonna have add for adding items. We're gonna have remove for removing items, clear for clearing all the items at once. So now how do we go about adding items? So inside of this, we're gonna add a items table, right? And this is where we'll be storing all the items. Now, how will they look? Well, we're gonna have an item ID, so it's going to be an ID which is going to hold another table which is going to hold the actual instance of the item, right? So it's going to be holding the instance and it's going to be holding the value. Okay, so with this in mind, we're going to go back down, and here in add, we're going to be accepting an ID and a value. Okay, and now we're gonna paste this. Okay, and what you want to do is in here, since we're going to be creating multiple of these like options, so once you've pasted this, we're actually going to go back up here. Now you see this instance, it's actually, by instance, it's gonna be like a table which holds like this, you know? So this is actually gonna be a table of instances like this, right? And it's inside you're gonna have like 45, and that's gonna be an actual instance, for example. Okay, so what you're gonna do down here, id.instance, okay? And then like the 4D. Just like so. So it's going to be looking like this. And you basically just want to put this everywhere. Okay, so what is this doing? So it's going inside the items table right here. It's taking the ID and it's taking the instance table. So instance, right? Instance is like a table, and each like part of the slider, like each of these things is going to be saved in here. Okay, And then we have the value, so we're gonna add that in the top. We're gonna have dot value is equal to value. Also, just to avoid errors, we're gonna copy this and put in the top and make it a table. Just to avoid like, oh, instance is not a table or stuff like that, okay? So since we have the ID, we might as well just use it as the title, right? So in the text, we're actually gonna be using the ID like that. This should create the option. Now notice I haven't changed this here because this dropdown 4B is actually this holder right here. So make sure you don't change that. So we should test if this works. So right here, right down here, where we have the dropdown, I'm gonna do d add. So it takes an ID, which is like a string. So let's do like Bob. And the value is gonna be like 12, for example. So we're getting an error right here. Dropdown items ID dot instance. Okay, so I did this wrong. It should be like this. ID is a table of instance is a table, and value is value, like that. Okay, there you go, and a comma here. And now we're directly adding to the instance. Okay, so let's try again. Okay, so no errors and you don't see anything in the dropdown. But if we go into the UI, to the content home tab, dropdown, as you can see inside the option holder, we have an inactive option and the text of it is Bob. And it's also holding our value inside that table. So now what we have to do is create the removing function, and then the clearing function will be easy to do, and then the harder part is like all the logic and stuff, right? So for the removing function, we're gonna just pass an ID, and we're gonna check if table.find dropdown dot items and ID, then dropdown dot items ID dot instance. All right, and so for each of these instances, we're gonna do v destroy. So we're gonna be destroying all of these, right? And then we're also gonna do table dot remove from a dropdown dot items, and we're gonna be removing the ID. So that should be it. And we're gonna try this right away. So we're creating one, and we're gonna do wait like 5 seconds. We're gonna do d remove Bob. And we're gonna open the UI right away. Content, home tab, drop down option. And it's still there for some reason. So let's debug this and see why it's not working. We're gonna print the ID and we're gonna print found. Alright, so I found out that apparently we can't use table.find for some reason. So instead we're gonna use a different option. We're gonna do if dropdown.items ID is not nil. Okay, so let's try this. Okay, so as you can see, it was found, but we got an error right here with table.remove. So can't use that either. So we're just gonna do dropdown items ID is nil. All right, just like that. So one more time, we're gonna check if it actually gets destroyed. And as you can see, the option is gone. So that's good. That works. And for the clear, we're just gonna do for IV in pairs dropdown.items do dropdown remove I. Okay, that's clear. There you go. So now for the logic, we're going to be adding 2 more methods, or actually only 1 more. And that one is going to be function drop down toggle. So opening and closing it. And for this to work, we're going to have a open state, which is false by default. So before we do this, we're going to get the click and hover handlers, just like any other one, right? And it should like kind of behave like a button. So I'm just gonna copy the one from the button right here. So right there, logic. Put all of these in the do as well. There you go. So let's change these up. We're gonna have mouse down false, and we're gonna have hover as false, just like so. And we're gonna have to change the IDs of these. So for the drop down, it's 45 for the main one. So all the ones with background color. So right here, background, and yeah. And for the stroke, it's 47. Okay, so we're gonna copy that and put it everywhere where it says color, right there. Okay, so let's test this real quick, and we got an error. Why is that? Oh, whoops. Okay, so we're also gonna need to change these to 45 as well. Now it should work. So if we try to hover, click, okay, so it works. And so let's remove this callback because we don't need it. And for the toggle, okay, so we're gonna have to make the drop down resize according to the amount of items that there are, right? So we're gonna do the first thing, we're gonna check if it's open. To open it, we're first gonna need the amount of items. So we're gonna do for IV in pairs, dropdown.items view, and we're gonna check if v is not nil, since all the nil ones have been destroyed. And we're gonna add a count variable here, which is gonna be 0, and we're gonna append to count whenever there is an item. Okay, so now that we have the amount of items, we're gonna tween. We're gonna tween the main object, right? Like the main frame, which is this one right here. We're gonna tween the size of it to be, so if we look at the normal size, it's 30, and if we look at the open size with, let's say, only like only one item, so let me just enable this and say we only have one option, right? And we're gonna resize it to fit that one option. So right here, 40, 48, nope, 40, 50, 54. Okay, so 54 seems like it fits. So that is 30 minus 54 minus 30, that is 24, right? So we're gonna need to add on the size every like 24, every item we're gonna have to add 24 pixels to the size. Okay, so we're gonna do udim2.new, and it's gonna be 1, 0, and then 0 in y, and we're going to take 30 plus count times 24. Right? And then in the end we want like some extra space, so we're going to do plus 4 in the end. And we're also gonna make the frame visible, the option holder, since it's invisible by default when they're not open. We're gonna have to make it visible. So we're gonna go up here to the option holder, this thing, so it's 4b, and as you can see it's invisible by default, but we want to make it visible, so we're gonna do visible is true, and there you go. That should be our opening function. And for the closing one, we're gonna set it to false, and we're gonna set the size to just 30 pixels, and we're gonna have a function on the callback, and it's gonna set it to invisible. We're gonna open it, or like toggle it like that. So let's test it. So if we click it, it tweens, but it doesn't tween back because I forgot to toggle it. But let's see why it's not like visible. I know why, because we deleted all the items. So let's add a few items first. So inside the toggle, we're gonna add like this, just like that. So let's see if this works. So we have these options here. As you can see, this works perfectly, looks very nice. But we're getting some extra weird space right here, and that is because we're adding too many pixels, I believe. So let's like tweak this a little. And also, before we proceed, we're gonna check if the ID already exists. So if dropdown items ID is not equal to nil, and we're just gonna return because it already exists. You could like return an error or like a message, but I'm just gonna return it to avoid like errors or anything. So down here in the opening part, we have count times 24. Now this actually only applies because the padding between like the top and the bottom of the element is like another like 10 or 12 pixels. The element itself is only 16, so we're only gonna add 16, and then we're gonna add plus 8 for the padding. Say like 4 pixels in the top and 4 pixels in the bottom. So let's test it again. And open, close, open, close. So as you can see, it was almost there. Okay, so after some playing around, I found out that just 1 pixel is the best. So yeah, there's your opening and closing, and the last thing we have to do is add functionality to these like items, right? So inside the logic, after everything, we're gonna make a for ID in pairs, library.items, actually not the library, dropdown.items. We're gonna take the instance, so v.instance, and we're gonna need like the first one. Now, since we know that the 4D, or actually which one was it? Yeah, the 4D is gonna be like the main one. We can just select 4D. So 4D, and we're basically gonna copy this entire code, but for this 4D instance, okay? So we're just gonna take this and boom, 4D, 4D, and what else? 4D, 4D, 4D. So yeah, just replace all of these, and then the stroke is gonna be 4E. Now we would have to like change up the colors since they aren't the same as the drop down, but I'm not gonna do this just to save time. But make sure to remove this, and once it's clicked, right, you're gonna do drop down options dot callback, and then v dot value. So there you go. And then once it's clicked, we're gonna do the the callback, and we're also gonna do toggle to like close it back up, right? Now if you want, you could also change the title to the value, so like drop down set value and then like v dot value, and then you could have like a function that like renames it, for example, but I'm not gonna do that. I'm just gonna have like a print. So yeah, in here I'm gonna add the callback, and we're gonna do print v was clicked, for example. So let's test it out. And we got an error. Why is this erroring? Okay, so since we can't do this because like we're like adding logic before adding the actual item, we're just gonna copy this code and remove this for loop, and we're actually gonna add it inside the add function where we're like creating the actual item, right? So instead of v.instance, we're just gonna copy this entire thing like that, and here as well. Here we can just use the value that we get from the arguments. So after like replacing everything, this should work. So let's try it again. So if we open it, we got a problem. Oh yeah, so in here we're gonna need like to actually create the item as an object, okay? And it's gonna have like the hover and the mouse down, if I can type, state. And here we're gonna have like now you see I'm kind of stupid. Instead of using instance here, I could have like just put the actual item and then store everything in here like you did with all of this stuff like normally. But I'm stupid and I didn't do it, but make sure you do that for like the future. Anyway, what we have to change here is a few things. So first off, this is gonna have to be item. So item here, item here, item, item, item. So just all these checks that are like the drop down, we're gonna need the item instead. So I'm just checking if like I missed anything, and it appears like I haven't. So let's try it one more time. So as you can see, the colors have changed because I haven't adjusted them, but we can now open and close it. We can hover on the options, and once you click them, well, we get this. Okay guys, so I found a fix after like thinking for a while. So remember, it's always a part of this, like just scripting in general. It's all trial and error every time, always. you'll never get something like right in the first try, like perfectly. So as you can see now, it works fine if we click any of these options. 1, 2, 3, and you can also close it normally. Now sometimes it bugs out like this because Roblox is slow as fuck. But anyway, so all I did was I created another variable in here called hovering item inside the drop-down table, and basically whenever you hover an item, it's set to true. Whenever you don't hover, it's set to false. And over here in the main logic, we're just checking if we're not hovering an item, and if we aren't, then we're just toggling it in normally. But if we are, we're not going to be toggling it because the item is already doing it for us, right? So yeah, that's your drop down. Now one thing before I stop is I'm gonna try the clearing function. So the clear, we're just gonna do this and try it out. Okay, so I guess we're gonna have to add an extra check in here. So if dropdown.items id.instance, and we're gonna check the length is more than 0, then end. Okay, so let's try that. Okay, so apparently dot instance is nil, so we're gonna have to check for that as well. Instead of that, we're just gonna do this, and let me make this waiting time shorter. So as you can see, the destroying actually worked, but we're getting an error here with the tweening. So as you can see, it's trying to tween the instance even though it was destroyed. So let's just put a check here, and we're gonna do if dropdown.items id.instance is not nil, or actually if it is nil, then we're just gonna return, just to not error here as well. Yeah, so as you can see, it's the same error but with items ID. So let's just copy this as well, bro. But yeah, that's how you do slider, and this video is fucking 50 minutes long, so goodbye.